The bedroom door creaks open just wide enough for small fingers to curl around its edge. 8-year-old Sarah peers through the sliver of light, watching her mother fold laundry with mechanical precision. Each shirt receives the same careful attention, each crease smoothed with deliberate strokes. Sarah's drawing, a crayon family portrait she spent hours perfecting, trembles in her other hand. The figures smile in bright yellow and red, holding hands beneath a sun that takes up half the page. She steps forward. "Mommy, I made this for—" "Not now, Sarah." The words come without her mother's eyes lifting from the cotton fabric. No anger, no raised voice, just absence, just air where warmth should live. Sarah's hand drops to her side, the paper crinkling against her leg. She retreats to the hallway shadows, clutching her masterpiece that suddenly feels like evidence of her own foolishness. This is how the hated child learns their first lesson. Love is not absent, it is selective. It exists in abundance for others, but becomes scarce when directed toward them. They discover that their presence disrupts rather than enriches, that their needs are burdens rather than natural expressions of childhood. The rejection is rarely violent or obvious. Instead, it lives in the spaces between words, in glances that slide past them, in enthusiasm that dies when they enter the room. What happens to a heart that learns to expect disappointment before it learns to expect love? What becomes of the child who grows up feeling like an intruder in their own home, unwelcome at their own table? A little boy sits at the dinner table. He doesn't talk much because he knows if he says the wrong thing, the room will go quiet and eyes will turn sharp. The fork scrapes against ceramic as he pushes peas around his plate. Across from him, his sister chatters about her school day, animated hands painting pictures in the air. Mum leans forward, eyes bright with interest. "Tell me more about the science project, sweetheart." Dad nods approvingly, reaching over to ruffle her hair. The boy clears his throat. "Today in math class, we learned about..." The energy shifts, subtly. Mum's smile doesn't quite fade, but it freezes. Dad's attention drifts toward his phone. His sister keeps talking, but somehow the space around his words feels different, colder, like he's speaking into a void that swallows sound. He learns to read the room with surgical precision, the micro expressions, the way conversations flow until he enters them. The difference between being heard and being endured. This isn't dramatic abuse. There are no raised voices, no cruel words. It's something more insidious, being hated in energy rather than action. You know this feeling, don't you? The sensation of being an intruder in your own home, not because anyone says you don't belong, but because belonging seems to happen around you, without you. Like watching a warm fire through glass. You can see the warmth, but you can't feel it. This is the silent reality of emotional rejection. It doesn't announce itself with violence or neglect. Instead, it whispers through withheld enthusiasm, through love that flows freely to others but becomes rationed when it reaches you, through the devastating discovery that your presence diminishes rather than enriches. Trust your inner experience. If you felt unwanted as a child, even without obvious abuse, your feelings are valid. Start by simply acknowledging, what I felt was real, and it wasn't my fault. And for many people, this is not a scene from a story, it is memory. The human heart is born seeking belonging. When that love is withheld or worse, replaced with resentment, the child does not merely feel unloved, they feel unworthy of love. There's a crucial distinction here that most people miss, and understanding it changes everything. Being unloved is a condition, something that happens to you. Being unworthy is an identity, something you believe you are. When 8-year-old Maria's mother consistently turns away when she tries to share her drawings, Maria doesn't just think, "Mom doesn't love my art." Her young mind, desperate to make sense of the rejection, concludes something far more devastating. There must be something wrong with me. This is where attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby, reveals a heartbreaking truth about human psychology. Children are biologically wired to maintain their connection to caregivers at all costs. It's literally a matter of survival. When that connection feels threatened by rejection, the child's mind performs a tragic sleight of hand. Rather than risk seeing the parent as flawed or unavailable, they absorb the blame themselves. It's a brilliant protective mechanism that becomes a lifelong prison. The child preserves the illusion of safety, my parent is good and capable of love, by sacrificing their self-worth, I must be unlovable. They trade external security for internal devastation. You carry this distinction in your body even now. Notice how different these questions feel. Why don't they love me? Versus, why am I unlovable? The first suggests circumstance. The second suggests essence. The first implies possibility for change. The second feels like a life sentence. This internalization creates what researchers call toxic shame. Not the healthy shame that says I made a mistake, but the soul-crushing shame that whispers, I am a mistake. It's the difference between I did something bad and I am bad, between I was rejected and I am rejectable. The neural pathways carved by this early conclusion become superhighways in the developing brain. Every subsequent interaction gets filtered through this core belief. Am I enough? Do I deserve love? What's wrong with me? These aren't occasional thoughts. They become the background soundtrack of existence. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's research on trauma shows how these early relational wounds literally reshape brain architecture. The child develops what he calls implicit memories, body-based beliefs about safety and worth that operate below conscious awareness, but govern every relationship. Perhaps you recognize this pattern. Maybe you achieved tremendous success, earned degrees, built impressive careers, received accolades, yet still find yourself lying awake at 3 a.m. asking those same childhood questions. Because achievement can't heal an identity wound. You can't perform your way out of feeling fundamentally flawed. The cruelest irony, often the very people who need love most desperately have learned to expect it least. They become experts at reading rejection in neutral expressions, at finding confirmation of their unworthiness in ambiguous interactions. Separate your worth from your childhood treatment. Practice this daily affirmation. I was worthy of love then, and I am worthy of love now. Write it down and say it aloud. Your nervous system needs to hear it. This is why hated children often grow into adults who struggle with the same quiet questions. Here's the shocking truth doctors are just discovering. Being emotionally rejected as a child literally reshapes your brain, and once you understand how, your nervous system remembers everything your mind tries to forget. When a child faces chronic emotional rejection, their developing brain makes a devastating calculation. This environment is dangerous. I must stay vigilant to survive. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes hyperactive, scanning constantly for signs of threat. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation, receives less developmental resources. Picture a smoke detector so sensitive, it sounds at the first hint of steam from a shower. That's your nervous system after childhood rejection, exquisitely calibrated to detect the slightest hint of disapproval, criticism, or abandonment. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research reveals how this neurobiological rewiring shows up in adult life. You walk into a meeting and immediately sense tension others can't detect. Your partner uses a slightly different tone and your body floods with adrenaline. A friend takes longer to text back and you're already crafting explanations for why they hate you. This isn't weakness, it's your nervous system's masterpiece of survival adaptation. But here's the paradox that will blow your mind. This hypervigilance often develops into an extraordinary superpower. Children who grew up reading emotional landmines become adults who can read a room with uncanny accuracy. They notice micro-expressions others miss. They sense undercurrents in conversations. They feel energy shifts before anyone else. One therapist who grew up in such an environment explains how this translates into adult life. Within minutes of meeting someone, she can sense if their marriage is struggling, if they're hiding an addiction, or if they're planning to leave their job. Her clients often marvel at her seemingly psychic abilities. The truth, she's simply fluent in the language of emotional survival, a skill developed not by choice but by necessity. Your brain literally rewired itself to become a sophisticated emotional radar system. The same neural pathways that once protected you from emotional danger now help you navigate complex social dynamics, excel in people-focused careers, and offer profound empathy to others in pain. Research by Dr. Elaine Aron on highly sensitive people reveals that approximately 20% of the population possesses this heightened sensory processing sensitivity, often developed through early experiences of having to be hyper-attuned to their environment for safety. But this gift comes with a cost. Your nervous system doesn't differentiate between past and present danger. The same sensitivity that helps you excel professionally can leave you emotionally exhausted after social interactions. You feel everything more intensely, both beauty and pain, connection and rejection. You might find yourself apologizing excessively for minor mistakes, scanning faces for signs of displeasure, or leaving conversations wondering if you said something wrong. Your body holds the memory of needing to be perfect to be safe, valuable to be loved. Recognize your hypervigilance as a skill, not a flaw. When you feel triggered by someone's tone or energy, pause and ask, am I responding to real danger? Or is my alarm system overactive? This awareness alone begins to rewire your brain. This survival skill becomes both a gift and a curse, because it leads to something even more complex. You're about to discover the 3 invisible survival strategies that hated children develop, and why even when they master these strategies and become successful, they still feel empty inside. The rejected child's mind is brilliantly adaptive. If being yourself didn't work, if authenticity brought rejection, then you'll become someone else, someone safer, someone more lovable. Enter the 3 masks of survival. The perfectionist emerges from the belief that flawlessness equals safety. If I can just be perfect enough, they'll have no choice but to love me. One successful surgeon reflects on her childhood understanding. A plus grades meant approval, winning competitions meant worth, and excellence became the only currency that could purchase love in her household. The perfectionist's adult life becomes an exhausting performance of flawlessness. They work 80-hour weeks, redo presentations 7 times, and panic when they make the smallest mistake. Their achievements are impressive, but inside they feel like frauds constantly on the verge of being exposed. The people pleaser adopts the strategy of self-erasure. If I have no needs, no opinions, no demands, I can't possibly be a burden. They become masters of reading others' desires and fulfilling them before being asked. One non-profit director came to a profound realization in his 40s. He had spent decades trying to anticipate what everyone wanted him to be, because being himself had never felt like enough. People pleasers excel at making others comfortable while slowly disappearing themselves. They say yes when they mean no, agree when they disagree, and sacrifice their own needs so automatically they forget they have any. The rebel chooses a different path. If I can't be loved, at least I'll be in control. They reject before being rejected, leave before being left, and armor themselves with anger and independence. I became so afraid of needing anyone that I convinced myself I needed no one, explains Anna, a successful entrepreneur who built a business empire but struggled with intimate relationships. Here's what's fascinating about these strategies. They often work brilliantly. Perfectionist children become high-achieving adults. People pleasers become beloved by everyone. Rebels become independent and successful. From the outside, their lives look enviable, but success built on survival strategies feels hollow because it requires wearing a mask. The perfectionist achieves recognition but never feels truly seen. The people pleaser is surrounded by people but feels profoundly alone. The rebel gains independence but loses intimacy. The cruelest irony, These strategies often lead us to recreate the very dynamics we're trying to escape. The perfectionist chooses critical partners who reinforce their need to be flawless. The people pleaser attracts takers who confirm their belief that love requires self-sacrifice. The rebel pushes away anyone who might actually love them, proving their theory that closeness is dangerous. Dr. Pete Walker's research on complex PTSD reveals how these aren't character flaws. They're sophisticated emotional survival systems developed by children who had to earn love instead of simply receiving it. You might recognize yourself in one strategy, or perhaps you've cycled through all three depending on the relationship or situation. Maybe you're perfect at work, pleasing in friendships, and rebellious in romantic relationships. These masks become so automatic that you forget you're wearing them. The tragedy isn't that these strategies exist. They saved you when you needed saving. The tragedy is mistaking them for your true self. Identify your mask. Ask yourself, am I being perfect, pleasing, or rebellious to feel safe? Then practice one small act of authentic self-expression today. Share a real opinion, say no to something, or make a good enough choice instead of perfect. But underneath all these strategies lies the same wound. I was not accepted as I am. Why does this matter? Because silence creates repetition. Children who grow up rejected often learn not to talk about it. The pain hides, festers, shapes choices from shadows. It whispers in the selection of partners who feel familiar, those who withhold affection just enough to feel like home. It echoes in the way you speak to your own children when you're tired, stressed, or triggered. Watch how this unfolds across generations. The grandmother who never felt good enough becomes the mother who cannot offer unconditional love. The mother who learned that emotions were inconvenient raises children who learn to hide their feelings. The father who was criticized for sensitivity teaches his son that vulnerability is weakness. None of them intended harm. Each was simply passing down the only blueprint they knew. Dr. Gabor Mate's research reveals how trauma travels through families like an invisible inheritance, encoded not in genes, but in patterns of relating. Children absorb their parents' unhealed wounds through 1,000 micro-interactions. The way love is offered conditionally, the way emotions are welcomed or dismissed, the way belonging is granted or earned. This is how cultures perpetuate emotional poverty. When enough families operate from scarcity, where love is limited, acceptance is conditional, and worth must be proven, we create societies that normalize the abnormal. We produce more hated children, not through cruelty, but through the simple absence of emotional safety. You see it everywhere once you recognize the pattern. In workplaces where vulnerability is punished, in relationships where love becomes a transaction, in communities where difference is threatening rather than enriching. But here's the profound truth that changes everything. Trauma echoes until someone chooses to stop the cycle. It only takes one person, one mother who learns to regulate her nervous system before disciplining her child, one father who models emotional intelligence instead of emotional suppression, one adult who finally speaks the truth about their childhood experience. One mother discovered this truth in a moment of recognition. As she was about to snap at her 5-year-old for spilling juice, she heard her own mother's voice coming out of her mouth. In that instant, she realized she had a choice. This destructive pattern could stop with her. Breaking generational trauma isn't about perfection, it's about consciousness. It's about developing the courage to feel your own pain so you don't unconsciously inflict it on others. It's about learning to speak the truths that your family kept buried in silence. Break the silence. Tell one trusted person about your childhood experience this week. If you're a parent, practice saying to your child, "I see you, I'm glad you're here, you matter to me." Words you may never have heard but can now give. Trauma echoes until someone chooses to stop the cycle. But here's the hidden truth. The identity of the hated child is not the essence of the child. It is a scar, not the skin itself. Beneath the survival strategies, beneath the compensatory behaviors, beneath the neural pathways carved by early rejection, your original self remains intact. Wounded perhaps, Buried, certainly, but not destroyed. This is where the real work begins, learning to parent the child within you in the way you deserve to be parented from the beginning. Reparenting isn't a mystical concept. It's a practical rewiring of your internal voice. Instead of the harsh critic that learned to keep you safe through self-attack, you develop an inner advocate, one that offers comfort instead of criticism, encouragement instead of judgment, unconditional love instead of conditional approval. One architect in his mid-40s describes the moment this understanding clicked for him. When he made a mistake at work, he immediately heard that familiar harsh voice, "You're such an idiot. How could you be so careless?" Then he paused and asked himself, "What would I say to a frightened child who made this mistake?" The answer came immediately. "It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. You're still learning. I still love you." That compassionate response became his new internal dialogue. The science behind this is remarkable. Dr. Rick Hanson's research on neuroplasticity shows that our brains remain malleable throughout life. Every time you choose self-compassion over self-criticism, you strengthen neural pathways of self-acceptance. Every time you validate your own experience instead of dismissing it, you build internal security. Step 1. Awareness journaling. Write down the voice in your head when you make mistakes, face criticism, or feel rejected. Is it kind or harsh? Whose voice does it sound like? What would you say to a beloved friend in the same situation? Step 2. Therapeutic relationships. Whether through professional therapy, support groups, or carefully chosen friendships, experience what Dr. Daniel Siegel calls earned secure attachment. You can literally rewire your nervous system through consistent experiences of being seen, accepted, and valued for who you are. Step 3. Boundaries as self-care. Learn to protect your energy from people and situations that replay your original trauma. This isn't about avoiding all discomfort. It's about distinguishing between growth edge challenges and re-traumatization. One woman who grew up with a hypercritical mother learned to recognize when she was unconsciously choosing relationships that felt familiar but harmful. She realized she was drawn to friends who constantly found fault with her because it felt like home. The criticism was painful but predictable. Learning to choose people who actually appreciated her proved more challenging than expected, as it required believing she was worthy of genuine liking. Here's what's extraordinary about this healing journey. The very wounds that seem to destroy you become the source of your greatest gifts. Your hypervigilance evolves into profound empathy. Your sensitivity becomes your superpower in helping others feel seen. Your resilience, forged in the fire of early rejection, becomes the foundation for helping others heal. The children who learn to read emotional undercurrents become the therapists, teachers, and leaders who can sense what others need. The ones who survived emotional starvation become the most generous with emotional nourishment. The ones who felt unseen become the most skilled at truly seeing others. This isn't consolation prize wisdom. At least something good came from your pain. This is recognition that human beings have an extraordinary capacity to transform suffering into service, wounds into wisdom, scars into strength. You are not broken. You never were. You are a survivor whose nervous system adapted brilliantly to impossible circumstances. Now you get to choose. Will you remain trapped in survival mode, or will you step into the fullness of who you were always meant to be? Start reparenting today. When you make a mistake or feel criticized, speak to yourself as you would to a hurt child. It's okay, you're learning. I still love you. Practice this self-compassion for just 5 minutes daily. It will literally rewire your brain over time. The hated child, in other words, is not doomed to be broken. They are invited to transform. So let us return to the image we began with, the little boy at the table staring at his plate, feeling invisible. Perhaps that boy is still within you. Perhaps that girl still waits to be seen. You now understand what that child could not. The rejection was never about your worth. It was about their capacity. The love that was withheld was not a reflection of your lovability. It was a reflection of their limitations. From Aristotle to modern neuroscience, one truth remains constant. Humans are wired for belonging. The need for connection isn't weakness, it's biology. When that need went unmet, you didn't break. You adapted, but now you face a different question. Not, why was I unwanted, but what kind of life do I now choose to build? If you see that invisible child in your mind's eye, whether it's you, your own child, or a child you know, look at them, see them, tell them what no one else did. You are worthy. You are enough. You belong. You exist, therefore you matter. This isn't philosophy, it's fact. Your worth was never dependent on their recognition. It was inherent from your first breath. The hated child is not truly hated. They are waiting for someone, perhaps even themselves, to finally say yes. Yes to their existence, yes to their feelings, yes to their right to take up space in this world. Your healing journey starts with one choice. Will you continue to see yourself through the eyes of those who couldn't love you properly, or will you begin to see yourself through the eyes of compassion? The choice is yours, and it starts right now.